Welcome back to Nerds Out of Water. This is a podcast brought to you by two tech professionals and longtime friends, Michael, that's me, and David. We've both worked in various technical careers and have switched to running our own businesses, taking us out of our little fish pond into an ocean of sharks. David, let me introduce him again if you haven't already listened to the podcast before. David runs a company called One Bright Cloud and has a view towards a future where AI is commonplace and autonomous vehicles provide transportation to your location with the smallest energy footprint.
Hey, Michael, thank you very much for that. Michael, let me introduce him, runs TeamScale, whose mission is to reduce the risk in software development projects, allowing visionary founders and talented developers to deliver amazing software on time and on budget. From time to time, we'll be joined by guests ranging from business to technologists and every role in between. We challenge our own perspectives and try to see things from each other's perspective. You don't need to agree with us, but after listening to this podcast, you'll have an idea of what we're talking about.
And David, welcome to 2021 and the first episode of this podcast.
2021.
Isn't it crazy?
Telling me. What happened to 2020?
Probably less said about that, the better.
True. But we're now looking forward. We have 2021. We've got a years of podcasts coming up, a new series, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. We've got a lot more guests this year as well. Today we have a special guest. Do you want to talk to us about our guest today, David?
I can indeed. Today's guest is quite an amazing guy. He describes himself as a serial entrepreneur and an angel investor. He is dedicated to actively supporting next generations of founders. So that actually quite excites me because that visionary effect is so forward thinking. He thinks about the product and the market and the strategies and the challenges that he can fix. And he's can provide us with a whole range of advices from capital raising, financials, and growth of businesses. I'm really excited to introduce to you today, Alex Retzlaff. Alex, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Good, David. Thanks for having me, mate.
Absolutely no problem at all. And welcome to the new year. So, Alex, I've known you for just a short time now. We got introduced through some wonderful people that we both know. Can you tell me a bit about yourself and how you got here? And tell me about you, because your LinkedIn profile is about 10 miles long, and I'd love to hear from you what you are and who you are.
Okay, there you go. Well, yes, it is a bit lengthy. Probably for the first sort of about 18 years of my career, I played entrepreneur. And after a few companies, the wanky term comes up and you become a serial entrepreneur. So originally landed in Australia at 17 as an exchange student, and then through TAFE and a little bit of uni, only a few months, I sort of landed, my first sort of position in my own business, and then I suppose the rest is history. Created about 8 different businesses in that time.
And what have you been doing with those businesses? Have you still got them? What type of businesses are they?
Okay, yeah. So all tech businesses. So the common denominator, I suppose, was difficult tech, so enterprise tech sort of stuff. So most systems over years ended up becoming big, expensive, multi-million-dollar sort of systems. And not because I'm anything special. I mean, I'm anything but special, I suppose, but definitely work with an excellent team. And I suppose I'll go one step back, and I'll say that I really got here through bucket loads of good almighty luck. Okay. What do I mean by that? If I really think about what got me to where I am, had very little to do with me, and I genuinely mean that. Okay, you came from Argentina originally. That's hence my accent. And at 17, and you might think, wow, came on its own at 17 to Australia, and that might sound very impressive. However, the reality is much more like, obviously all the opportunities that that I had, from my family that had very little to do with me. When I was born, this wouldn't have been possible 100 years ago. Being, white, privileged white male, that kind of stuff. Historically, my great grandfather, incredibly wealthy, and took generations to dilute that wealth, which enabled me to be here in the first place. I then very quickly met my girlfriend at the time, now my partner, Carmen, which, by the way, does not speak Spanish. And before you ask, with a name like Carmen, and and her family adopted me. I didn't know it at the time. I was a big grown-up 17-year-old, and and they basically adopted me, and so I inherited a beautiful family. None of which, can you see? So none of these things really have a lot to do with me, right? So to that end, I see myself much more as a passenger of my own journey as I do an actor. Okay, and then that just continues on. Okay, the same pattern continues on. It's a great team that I formed through TAFE, and I had nothing to do with the people that went into TAFE at that time with me, and the head of the department that I eventually ended up employing, and so on. I had nothing to do with his amazing software engineering skills and that kind of stuff. I just been so incredibly lucky.
So you've taken on that luck, but some would see that as you seizing the opportunity and noticing the opportunity and taking it. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, correct, and that's but it still is an accumulation. And I thank you very much for bringing that point. But I still see it as what it is just this accumulation of little things that lead me to where I've been. Like, what did I have to do with my parents that were going through a divorce and whatnot, and were going through their own sort of life journeys at the time, that gave me a key when I was very, very young, and I just, I roamed around my town in Argentina, and I became very independent. What did I have to do with that? So sure enough, it shaped me. But what did I really have to do? Who am I, if not the result of the accumulation of all those things? Does that make sense? And so, yes, I had no fear come to the other side of the world because of the way that I grew up. But did that upbringing have much to do with me, or was I basically just basically a passenger in that journey, as I say? And so,
did you go to university in Argentina, or?
No. I came at 17. From secondary school to secondary school, did year 11 twice, never finished high school.
So when you were 17 and you did your short term in TAFE, I think you said.
Yes.
Was over here?
Yeah, TAFE categorically. So I did year 11 and went straight to TAFE, did a diploma in software development for 2 years, then had a bit of a play at uni. But it was then that I was able to get a visa through Carmen as a spouse, basically spouse visa. So she sponsored me.
Yeah.
Again, my mighty luck, and I was able to stay.
Yeah. Well, when I first went to university, there were no IT degrees. Actually, at Reading College of Technology, they had 3 computers when I was there.
Yeah.
That's just showing my age. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
So how about now, Alex? How was your career affect? How do you manage to balance your family life and your career now? Given that all through those times you said you had a great family, and you had a great adopted family, and then everything from there seems to have been lucky. Are you still managing to balance the family and the work?
Look, as best I can, but I made plenty of mistakes along the way. I think a lot of the kudos of long-standing relationship carried us through. I definitely had to work pretty hard, yes, and take those opportunities. But I was having fun along the way as well. So took some risks, that sort of thing. Now, how did that shape me and so on? So yeah, once again, from a very hard working mom, largely spent the large part of my my young years with my mum, and she was very hardworking. So again, all those examples in your life, right? That show you that hard work is something that you do if you want to get somewhere. And then because I took those risks and I was leading teams along the way and so on, and I kept on, I suppose, increasing that exposure, is that eventually it led to us, having a comfortable living. What did it have to do with the amazing country that we live in? I fell in love with the country very quickly, and then Carmen months after that when I first arrived, and the possibilities that exist in Australia, given that we speak English, we technology is all around us, we're quite wealthy and so on, and then so I inserted myself in that amazing environment.
Wow.
So that's a common thing that's come out of that. Especially in divorced families, when we've been speaking to people, that the mother has been so hardworking that the child, such as yourself, myself, have watched their parent working so many hours to get just enough to get bread on the table, and then we've learned our way through that. Do you have children?
Yeah, 3 beautiful kids. So at the moment, 11, 13 and 15, and beautiful years, and crikey, they're growing so quickly, and so we're trying to capture every moment. My youngest, my boy 11, he's still very cuddly, and still hug him to the point that he has trouble breathing. But they're growing up too quickly.
I don't know if that hugging will last long with the boy.
That's right. I made him promise, though. Doesn't matter how big you get, you still jump on me. It'll be ridiculous to see. It'll be absolutely ridiculous to see. But
Funny.
So, are you a big social media person?
Oh, really interesting question. Okay, so social media is a big topic. So as you know, you don't pay for it, so we are effectively the product. The consumer and that sort of stuff. So on a personal angle, I'm very much not a social media person at all. I just don't get it. Don't feel it's valuable for me. Although, for example, I see the example in my wife that does use a lot of social media, hours a day, and when she needs something, though, it's quite amazing that she can reach out to that network and what she's able to get. So the examples of there's a lost pub. And so for all the investments of hours that she puts each and every day, then she has that extension that something happens in the area. She can put it into a local group, and because she contributes to it and so on, then people do reach out and help, either because we lost our own dog or something like that, whatever happens, right? So there's a lot of different sort of community pages and groups that we're part of. And so if I don't know, if we can't contact one of our kids, the probability is that we put it on social media in one of these private groups, and within minutes someone say, "Oh yeah, I last saw." Yeah, exactly. We know that they're safe and they're on their way.
I think that's one of the amazing things about 2020, and the fact that we've all been locked up in some respects. We've managed to build these communities. I mean, our neighborhood has got so much closer with the amount of social activity that's happening, both in person and on social media. We have a WhatsApp group so that it's an emergency one, where if there's something that happens at night, for example, someone gets broken into or there's a car stolen, there can be 3 or 4 of us out there at one point, pretty much within 10 minutes, and it's amazing.
That's it. Exactly. So I sort of wish that they will charge you for it. I literally would. I wish they would charge me, $5-10 a month, and they would just not sell our data, don't advertise, don't advertise to us and so on. I think that, you do the math, there's still a lot of money when you times it by billions, and I wasn't. So that's on the personal side. Okay. So I wish that social media was a bit, because it's very powerful, but I wish it was better. And then on the business side, yes, I do. LinkedIn, I think, is enormously valuable, a very powerful tool, and I use it, 10 times a day.
I find that LinkedIn is moving very much into the career opportunities now. There's a lot more businesses advertising career opportunities through LinkedIn.
Yeah. But you see, even then, I do like their approach, because if you're not up for a position or something like that and you want to use it for a different purpose, like in my case, I'm now into venture capital. So I use it to reach out to and build my network in that space. And I don't feel like I've been bombarded with information, or I don't feel like people are reaching out to me where it's highly irrelevant and things like that. So I don't feel like it's a waste of my time. It's quite the opposite. I think the value that it adds for free, it's incredible. I can only imagine how much more powerful it would be on a paid account. Yeah.
I mean, other than social media, I mean, tech has become really significant in what we do day to day these days. And is there other technology that you have found to be able to do the similar things to social media that in your experience, like things that have just come up and made you go, wow, I can really use this in my life?
Of course. Yeah. But look, video, although we have been remote for the best part of a decade. So, a lot of people say, oh, Zoom is insane. Well, we've been using Zoom for 5 years.
Yeah.
Or longer, So, and before that it was Skype and so on. So I remember we had one of the first sort of 360 cameras. So we would put in the center of the table and run a Skype, and then the people on the other side could literally turn around the camera and point to whoever was doing the stand-up meeting, right? So whoever was talking, they could turn to and view them on a $350 camera, right? So we have been using technology for a long, long time, because we are a tech business and on a budget, by the way, nothing too fancy. It sounds more fancy probably than what it is. So, but I think it's hard to dispute just the power of connectedness. Just this Squadcast that we're using to record this podcast. I mean, how incredible! On a browser, nothing to download. It just works, right?
And we can see each other's reactions and eye movements and things like that, read our body language. So that's really important, I think, when you're talking to people, because especially, I mean, we're like, David and I are a lot like you. We've been using this technology for years, and now we've got everyone using it. It's, people, so there are some people who don't like to turn the video on, and that makes it really difficult when you're talking to them, but we're just used to it now. So, yeah.
So, you say you've been using technology for a long time, and I've done a lot of work with, the Internet of Things and all of this sort of thing. I've been building up different businesses. What tech has changed for you?
Yeah, good point, Dave. So how about if I say, rather than tech, what the tech has enabled, if I may answer it that way?
Yeah,
okay, so I was thinking about this, and there's a great story that just came up with one of our portfolio companies, and that is that they were able to or they got invited into Y Combinator, and because of COVID, they actually running the whole cohort completely remote. And so from here in Australia, not to mention that about 10 companies in the whole history of Y Combinator from Australia ever got accepted into the program, but they can do it from here. Spread throughout Australia. So the power of technology and the change that that COVID has created and has enabled. So I think that's a beautiful example. And then the other one, back to my roots in sort of mining software as well, and that is that a lot of mines have upgraded their networks and their systems and are much more willing to take basically a video conference call, where in the past they would have liked you to visit them. They would have liked to see you face to face. And look, incredibly kind. They would pay you for the flights and so on, and accommodation and all that kind of stuff. But it's still, in many places in Australia, it will still take you a day there and a day back. So you might occasionally had a half a day meeting that was effectively a 3-day endeavor. So now we can have the same, pretty well the same meeting in the space of a few hours, right?
Talk about travel, because I mean, you just mentioned traveling out to see mining sites and things like that. You've also worked in places everywhere around the world. Do you find different, with mining companies here in Australia, obviously, I said they like to meet face to face and all of that. Do you find different approaches around the world to how things work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, are we still talking about the differences in before and now, or in general?
In general,
in general, right?
I mean,
okay.
Just to give you context, I mean, I've got a team in Vietnam. I've worked in the Philippines before. I worked in India before. A lot around Asia. We've got clients in the US, and there are subtle cultural differences that really make the way that you work have to change to accommodate those. And I think that it's wonderful because we get to learn new cultures and get to learn new ways of doing things. But it also can be frustrating when you can't get your message across easily.
And I got one of those stories for you, if I might share.
We'd love to hear it. Go for it.
Okay, so in my second last business, after the third last one that went really well and allowed us to take a lot of time off and holidaying and whatnot. But anyway, I got back into things in the last couple of years, and we basically developed this technology for the transport industry that was applicable to developing economies. What happens in the public transport industry, in particular buses in developing economies, is that there's a lot of fare evasion. And theft of fares as well. So it's a combination of people not paying for using the bus, so passengers not paying, and also bus drivers stealing a ton of money. Anyway, and so I fell in love with the problem, and I sold this contract that was meant to be $1 million yearly recurring revenue, and put all this time and money and team behind it. At some point, I had about 10 people working on it, burning money left, right, and center of my own personal dough. And by the way, we signed a heads of agreement prior to doing anything at all. So on the back of an idea, we sold this $1 million a year contract. And through the trial that we managed to score to kick off the project, the client would not share the information with us that we needed to determine the trial a success or a failure. And the other one is that they started renegotiating partway through the trial, which meant that basically $1 million a year became about $250,000. And so, of course, that was not longer viable. So I ultimately had to end up canning the project. And so I ordered the team that was in Chile to basically sack the customer. So differences and issues with trust and so on, I think are very significant and not to be underestimated. I should have known better. I myself, as I said initially, I come from Argentina, and I do know the issues with trust and how they operate differently. And definitely that was an experience that I'll take with me for a long, long time. And then there's another side one that I'll add as well, and that was this massive association of buses doing nearly 1 million tickets a day, right? So their contract was even bigger, it was about $3 million. And we're out there and we absolutely sold them on the idea. They said nobody ever spoke with so much passion and so much conviction to solve their problem. And they couldn't believe that we were coming from the other side of the world to look at addressing this issue and so on. So at the end of the presentation, they took us to the board table with tea and bickies and the whole sort of board and all that. And then at some point through the conversation, they threw it up there. It's like, what is in there for them? So what is in there for them? The actual directors of the association. Can you believe it? So these guys are hemorrhaging, tens of millions of dollars, and we're genuinely trying to address a theft and effectively a corruption problem within the passengers and the bus drivers and so on. And the directors of the association had the audacity to ask what was in there for them.
So the corruption is starting at the top down, all the way through.
Exactly right, right. So back to your original question, absolutely not to be underestimated. So ask yourself, as a founder, in what environment are you launching a business? And if that's an environment that and perhaps how do you want to participate some people will say that's just the way that it runs over there, and that's acceptable. I personally, didn't have to do that. I could have solved any of other hundreds of or thousands of problems out there to be solved, and I wanted to do good business. And in that environment, that was not appreciated. And so yeah. On hindsight, I should have known better. Yes.
How did it all end up?
Yeah. Look, between those situations, myself running out of money, much more money that I initially wanted to commit to that solution or that problem, and then within a couple of months, as we were basically restructuring and seeing if we go at it again, then we had the whole COVID situation explode, and so effectively I parked it. And perhaps one day I'll do something with the IP. I know I don't personally want to do that anymore at the moment. I parked it and I'm focusing on things that are better businesses to be doing. And then by all means, one day might dust it off and try to do something with the IP. But I'm probably thinking of licensing it out or something like that.
You must have some pretty exciting things on the cards at the moment. What's next for you?
Right. Okay. So, so I had this third last business, went really well. Left that with an amazing team to continue it, both in the ground, the team that began that business with me, beautiful people that are I say in my one pager, I say that the result of the successes that we had, but very much the result of teamwork, and to that team I owe hence those successes, right? So that team is still there. And my co-founder Paul is still very much leading the business. We put together a really strong board that is looking to create a lot of value long term for that business. And so that gave me the opportunity to step away from that, because that business was growing beyond the point that I add most value. I love the early stage. I've done so many early stage businesses, either of my own or help others. And so I wanted to double down on that. So, after having worked very hard for about 18 years, we had a half lap of Australia, which was beautiful, 6.5 months with the family, just visiting all places of Australia. Highly recommend it.
That's nice.
Yes. Having done this business in the transport industry as I was also holidaying. And anyway, and then after that, I sort of started really backing other founders. So I was testing that out and so on, and so I ended up making 6 direct investments into other founders, sort of basically what they call angel investments or early stage investments, and also backed a couple of funds. Again, great opportunities, and in that environment with the founders and the funds, which then bring about or aggregate a lot of other founders and a lot of other startups. I just had this opportunity to meet these amazing people. Like, one of my criteria is that I got to clearly see that these founders are better than I ever was as a founder. And so that to me is one of the big things that I look for before I sort of back a founder. And so I did a lot of that. And that's been going on for about the past 16 months now. And that then led me to join forces with a venture fund that is being put together at the moment.
What other things do you look for in a founder? You mentioned, the founder. I mean, I've always heard that the founder has to be extremely passionate, and a founder gets back, not necessarily the company. The founder could have thousands of ideas, so that it's good to get the right founder. Maybe they're not quite the right company yet. But what sorts of things do you look for? By
way of example, right? What did I notice about exceptional founders? Okay, they keep their stakeholders really well informed. And there was one particular example of a founder that I love within the portfolio, and he keeps the team, his team, he's on the ground, the investors as well, and his clients, so well informed that whenever he needs to take action on something, he very quickly gets an outcome from that, because he has been creating that connection and that authentic connection. So when it comes to needing something, then that need is met very, very quickly. Well, that is really powerful when you really think about it, especially when you're reaching out to exceptional people. Like he goes and says, who would I dream about having in my board? And he starts interacting with that and forming a relationship, probably a year or two ahead of needing that person, right?
Wow.
And so by the time he needs money, or he needs to put the board together, or he needs to make the next hire and so on, they are ready. And so he can act on it quickly and promptly. I myself there's one really talented architect here in the area, like software architect here in the area in Newcastle. And we danced around for 4 years before the stars aligned, and we were able to eventually do a project together. And of course, this person went extremely well in doing that. And so, and then when I introduced him now to someone, I said, okay, but be mindful. I worked on this for 4 years. So, exactly. So please, if I facilitate this intro, would you follow up on it? Right. Because, that kind of stuff. So I think that's definitely one thing, being an excellent communicator, and that also scales as the business grows. Bigger and bigger. The good communication then typically, not always, but typically brings about a good culture. There's a correlation between good communicators and the culture behind those businesses, and then good cultures scale. You see. So it's not something that you need only for the beginning, but something that scales really well, as that's the business. What position are they in? Can they have enough runway either within the business or within their own personal situation, so that they're not going to be under stress just a couple of months down the track? That's not good. Good decisions come about having good options. And so I'm looking what options do they have upon them to be able to make those good decisions. I do look at what they do. I don't think that I'm simply backing good founders. For example, I was looking at could I see myself getting a return from those investments? That was also really important for me. I didn't just want to bet on an idea. I don't even like the word betting. I don't necessarily betting on those. I'm looking to back a founder and their idea, hopefully. And sometimes they pivot, and that's okay. And for that, then we got to bring a lot of understanding, support, and sometimes that support even it's not just contacts and ideas, but even further funding.
Yeah.
And a bunch of the investments that I mentioned earlier were follow-on rounds, which I think conveys that conviction that I have, and that mutual conviction, really, the founders and vice versa.
We have 3 questions that we ask everyone on the podcast. The first question is, what would you do differently if you had the chance?
Okay, well, coming back to my original comment a bit earlier. So I wouldn't have done that business in the transport industry partway through this amazing opportunity of forgetting about the world and spending six and a half months time with my family. I very much think that I stuffed up there, and even though the bulk of the priority was with the family, and I like to be quite present and that kind of stuff, I wasn't as present as I would have liked to be. My wife very much, as you can expect, gave me that feedback, and so it's an opportunity that we might never get again, and so that's something I would have loved to have done differently. Yeah. And to that end, I genuinely these days I reach out to founders that are likely to be following a similar path of, expecting an exit or something like that, and potentially gaining a position where they can choose what to do next, and that next could be something very different, including backing other ventures, like as it happened to me. And so I genuinely reach out to these founders, and I say, look, let me share not only this stories, but also, can I help you make better decisions genuinely? Generally, whether it be that they are in a position that they're wanting to back the fund that we're putting together, and that's great guns, or some other opportunities that I see to be really good after a few years of being in that space, so that again, coming back to that comment is, with good options you make better decisions. So can I help other founders don't make the same mistakes?
But the good thing about what you've been able to do is you have not only taken this as a learning experience for yourself, but you're now manipulating the experience as a learning experience for the people that you're talking to. So it was obviously a long journey for yourself and your family. But the good news is you've taken it, come out the other side, and you're using it as a really strong learning experience. Exactly.
And second would have been to communicate better with Carmen during that whole journey. We spent much more money that we initially agreed on, and so on. Just things got a little bit out of control. I was trying to really fulfill this contract and an opportunity that could have been incredible if we pulled it off. Ultimately, we didn't, and such is life. But the effect and the effect that had in our relationship, and of course in the family, that will take a long time to rebuild and so on. And I hope can make us stronger going forward. But still, on hindsight, I very much wish that I did those things better. I don't per se want to take it back. I just wish that I'd done it better.
So if you weren't doing what you're doing right now, what would you be doing?
Look, it's a bit of a funny one and not very insightful, but I'll be finishing the house renos that we began. So I'm not kidding. It's a very interesting one, that one. It's a very, we live in a beautiful sort of cottage, it's an old home, very modest in many ways, but I buried a lot of really smart tech and great insulation, and everything is electric and stuff like that. So also it's a bit of a almost has its own brain of its own, and it takes a lot of effort to get it going properly. And so I'll be focusing on that if I gotta be honest. And at the moment it's a little bit neglected.
Brilliant. That probably leads us well on to the next question. Do you have any predictions for the future of technology?
Okay, well, I have to ask your permission here to be a little bit daring and a sensitive topic.
We are very daring, so we're always interested in anything. We've talked about all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff on this channel. So
okay, it's a sensitive topic, so I please no listener to send me hate mail as a result of it.
So we promise not to send it to anybody apart from everyone who's listening.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Could COVID been the thing that saved us ultimately? And so where am I coming from? Okay, so bear with me. So obviously COVID is a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. On the last count, there's been about 1.6 million deaths, and an estimated about 400 million job losses. And of course, a generational issue with families as a result of the big change that occurred and so on, just to name a few issues. Okay, so obviously, in one in a lifetime kind of event, unlike no other, affecting each and every country around the world and so on. So an enormous impact and a terrible thing. So that's not to be ignored or disregarded. So on one hand, now, but what could be the other side of the coin of that? So what's happened as a result of it, though, is there has been an acceleration of innovation that it came from it, right? So if you think about the people that lost their jobs and wanting to do something, and we certainly experienced an influx and most accelerators and so on. So in the startup world, I know that definitely there has been an influx of applications and so on, and people wanting to use this opportunity to do something and start a business and so on. And yes, maybe the failure rate of startups that is already very green probably got even higher, but overall has more innovation than being commercialized. Okay, so there is an economic benefit, I think, that we are going to see in the upcoming decade or two in a way that I don't think we can quite seen before. Not only because it is 2020 and things are different now, not only just the mere fact that we are where we are now in time, but also the direct effects of COVID and the opportunities related to COVID. So again, without downplaying all the other sides, but I think definitely there has been an acceleration of innovation, of course, and then commercialization of that innovation. For example, I know in the funding stage, people also wanting to get better returns and so on, and getting a lot of money out of like standard sort of public stocks and looking for other place to get returns and so on, which has created an enormous amount of basically redirection of capital, and some of that capital is then being put into innovative ideas. Right. That creates wealth in the economy. So then the other thing that has happened has shown us that we are fragile, I think, is the other effect of COVID as well. So we are not this indestructible society that no matter what, we keep on adapting our environment and just surviving through it. Is showing us that, I think, very clearly we are fragile, and something relatively trivial can bring the whole thing crashing down, right? And the other thing that this wealth that sounds very, sounds like comes from a capitalist sort of perspective, and in some way that does. But what does it do? So when you now have, I don't know, 1 million people now that pre-COVID wouldn't have normally become eventually wealthy, they are now wealthy. Some of those people are already, and not to mention middle class and so on, that can still do something about this. But let's just say a new generation of wealthy people, came out as a result of it. Is that there are others that are working on ethical investing and so on that I have not and at a level that I haven't heard before. Okay, and female-led businesses and so on. So there's a whole sort of other angle that when there is abundance, and in our world of startups, there is quite a lot of abundance in many ways, sometimes too much, also means that you can start focusing on those things that seem to be less kind of obvious to be just for to maximize a return, and more for ethical reasons, because I hear funds that say we will consider investments because they have an ethical angle, and we may wish to ignore certain risk on a particular investment because it has an element of good for the earth and so on. As Spaceship, the super fund, they released a particular product that is all about ethical investing and so on. So there's all these things that are coming together, as I said, female-led businesses, and a lot of funding that is specifically and only reserved for female founders and so on. So all these things are coming together, and I think that some of it, at least, will then be channeled around existential risks. Okay, so I think there will be an increased focus on issues that are of an existential risk nature, that were accelerated, I think, directly from this once in a lifetime effect of COVID. It's a little bit far-fetched, and that's my prediction. We know it didn't come through if the world ends in the next couple of decades, and if it hasn't ended, then it probably has become true.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's got. I understand where you're coming from, but I wonder if post-COVID, all of that has longevity, or do we all back to where we were before?
And some things will, some things naturally will, and others will never go back. And there is not going to be one answer to that question, David. It's going to be a salad of those. The point is, are some of those things. I've heard people thinking about purposeful changes, purposeful benefit at a rate that I never heard before. That I'm sure of already.
Me too. And I think it's brilliant for people to be thinking about that, because we've been talking about it for, probably 5-10 years nearly, and talking about it isn't doing it. So now there's people actually doing it.
Correct.
And for those people who are struggling through COVID, and something we do very regularly, Beyond Blue are there for anybody and everybody. Their number is 1300 224 636. That's 1300 224 636. And to anyone who's struggling, please reach out and please get some help to move yourself forward one step at a time.
Beautiful. Well said, Dave.
Alex, it's been wonderful to talk to you. Thank you very much for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Great having you. Thank you very much for that.
Cheers, Dave. Cheers, Michael.
Welcome back to Nerds Out of Water. Nerds Out of Water is brought to you by two tech professionals and long-time friends, Michael Lobb and David, whatever his name is. We're going to go through that.